Hey, Matrix Live. Welcome to a slightly unusual edition. We've got 4 guests, although you might say we've only got 1 guest because they're all from a project called OpsDroid, which you may have seen. Why don't you guys go around and introduce yourselves? Let's start from the way that I can see it, which is Kader. What can you say about yourself?
Yep, I'm Kader or Stuart. I am a solar physicist and happen to have got involved in making and improving the matrix support in OpsDroid a while ago.
Cool. What about you, Jacob?
So I'm Jacob. I'm a software engineer. I started OpsDroid a few years ago now, and kind of focus on working on the core of the project. But then other folks have come in and brought support to like other chat platforms. But I'm sure we'll get into that.
Cool. Stu? Sorry, Drew.
Don't worry, happens all the time. Yeah, I mean, basically the same as Stu said. I'm a solar physicist, software dev. Got into OpsDroid a few years ago.
So I'm very interested to hear why there's such an overlap between solar physicists and OpsDroid. That's something that I hope will be covered later on. Fabio, what about you?
Hi, I'm Fabio. I'm a flight attendant, and I started contributing to OpsDroid. It was my first open source project, and I've been doing it for about 4 years, I think.
Wow, cool.
Jacob will probably remember better.
Yeah, it's about that.
Yeah.
But your day job is you're a flight attendant.
Yeah, I want to jump into dev in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, you've been contributing to open source for 4 years. I think that's plenty of credentials. Cool. All right. So why doesn't somebody tell me what is OpsDroid?
Yeah, okay, I'll start with that one. So it's a Python application that allows you to hook into different chat platforms and write like natural language. We call them skills in OpsDroid, right? But you write like a function of code that does something that is triggered by something that happens in a chat platform. So the most common way to think about that is like a chatbot, right? You say hello, the bot says hello back. So you write small Python function. If somebody says hello or some variant on hello, then the bot will respond with hello. But then you can kind of take that and almost use it as like a scripting tool. So you can kind of embellish it out to whatever you want to do. So the original use cases, I was working in like a very DevOps heavy job at the time. I wanted something where I could deploy applications directly from within Slack. And so I started using Hubot, which is like a GitHub maintained JavaScript framework. And we used that for a while and we're happy with it. But there was kind of some like downsides to it that I was kind of facing. One of them was just that it was written in JavaScript. We were a group of Python developers. We could write JavaScript, but we would prefer to write Python. And the other like challenge around that is GitHub were really into CoffeeScript at the time. So all of the documentation for Hubot was in CoffeeScript.
Right.
So we were kind of didn't necessarily want to write CoffeeScript. We were writing JavaScript, but kind of parsing the documentation in our brain. So like that was just like a big hurdle for us in terms of that. So we started looking into what other frameworks were available. There's a few like quite popular ones. There's one called Lita, which is a Ruby one, but again, with Python devs. And then there's another one called Urbot, which is written in Python and was like a strong contender for us. But Urbot very much follows the like format of moving your command line to your chat platform. Right? You make specific commands with a specific syntax, and it does some specific operation. But I really wanted to make it more about natural language. How could the bot really understand what you're actually saying? So when I started working on it, I made sure that lots of sections of it were pluggable. So you could write plugins for other chat connectors. You could, if you want to persist information, you could have plugins for different databases. And mainly, if you wanted different ways of understanding a string that has come in from a chat client, like could you plug into different services, right? There's a bunch of different online APIs for doing natural language processing. Or you can just do like simple regular expressions, right? You can kind of plug in different ones, mix it up, however you
want. Okay. I mean, that's something fascinating. So, I mean, I can understand how you get from natural language and then extract stuff by regular expressions. But even if you could get something meaningful back from a natural language API, how would you then know what to do with that result?
So there's like a bunch of different ways. I feel like I've been talking for ages. So like I know Fabio's worked a bunch on the different natural language things. So I don't know if you want to explain a bit about how like WIT or something handles the.
Yeah, I can jump in. So the API gets a message that we pass through OpsDroid, So OpsDroid will read a message from a connector, let's say Slack or Telegram or Matrix.
Let's say
then
Matrix.
We pass that message. Yeah, let's say Matrix. And we pass that message to the API, let's say the WeTie or Dialogflow service. And then it gives us a set of entities and what the API sort of gets from that message. And then with OpsDroid, we use the results that we get from the API to do something with those results. So let's say if we ask, or if you pass a message saying, what's the weather in Gatwick? It will give us entity Gatwick location and weather is what we want to do. And then we probably will call another API to get the details from that location and pass it over to the chat connector.
Okay, so the idea is that the responses you get back from these processes are semantic enough that you can, this is tagged as a location, this is tagged as the concept of weather, and you can figure it out from there.
Yeah, because a lot of the parsers, they have entities that you can create, and you can train the parser a little bit more to get the right thing you want to do. So it's quite quick to try to get a detail from a message or entity from a message, and then just do something with that specific entity.
Right. Okay. That's actually fascinating. Okay, I need to pay a lot more attention to this.
Quite a lot of these services are like, they're all very similar, right? Dialogflow is Google's offering, WitAI is Facebook's offering, right? Like lots of people have got different things, and a lot of them you configure with like a GUI. Some of them you can give like config to, but you go in and create like a semantic entity, and you say like, get weather is like an entity that I want to create, and you give it a whole load of examples of different ways of phrasing that question. And then it trains some statistical model on how to detect whether somebody has said that sentence or a variation of it. So we then just get back the ID that we created. We created get weather. So we just get back get weather. And it can, as Fabio said, it does clever stuff with entity extraction to work out what's the subject of the sentence. And did you mention a location? Did you mention a quantity? And things like that. And we just pass all of that straight through into the Python. So you get use decorators in Python to set the ID, and then the function that you define is called with all the like entities and things that comes back from the API. So we then hand everything completely back off onto the user to write whatever Python they want.
So, okay, so out of the box, what sorts of skills? I mean, weather is kind of the big example, right? So what else could you do? I thought that there was a focus on like server administration, but maybe I've got that wrong.
It's totally freeform. Like it's whatever the user wants it to be. And I didn't want to bake in any OpsDroid basically does nothing out of the box. When you set it up, it does install a couple of like example skills that we have, but those are kind of, you say a single word in a sentence and it responds with a GIF. You say dance and you get Carson from Fresh Prince dancing in a GIF, right? And it's just to kind of show here's how to create a really basic trigger and action skill in OpsDroid. But then it's like for whatever people want to do. I use it mainly for server administration. More recently, I've been using it a lot for home automation as well, because it can trigger on other events. But again, I'm probably going to hand off to the other guys who implemented the entire event system to talk a bit about like other things you can do other than speech.
So this is the connector system, I guess, of which Matrix and other chat platforms are available are a type of connector. But then, so you talk about home automation. Is triggering a sensor? Is that using the same connector API?
It's using the same API. So we have like an event-based system. So we have like a basic message event, which is a piece of text that's come from a chat client, and that gets constructed up and then passed around OpsDroid and goes through the different parts. So a connector is responsible for constructing events and then handing them off. And then that might get sent off through a parser, and it will then go into a skill, and then a skill may construct new events and send them back through OpsDroid to go back through. So yeah, for home automation, one of the things I did over the holiday break was build a connector for Home Assistant. Another very popular Python open source project for doing home automation. You can now hook OpsDroid into Home Assistant, and you get events like sensor value changed and switch changed, and all different whatever you've got configured in your home automation. And then you can send other things back. You might want to send a message through to a chat client, or you might want to send a switch toggle event back through to turn on a light or something like that.
So what would be the benefit? Is that not something that can be done within the home automation platform itself? What would be the benefit of introducing OpsDroid? Just more flexibility?
It's more flexibility. I mean, Home Assistant, as to like stick with that example, has a built-in like configuration automation thing. So you can write some YAML config to define your automations, but there are like a bunch of limitations in terms of the way that you can define your syntax, especially if you want to like do something 3 times, then wait 10 minutes, then do something 4 times and then wait 3 minutes, but only if this other condition, right? Like you can get into a right mess with the YAML.
Definitely.
So like there's like a bunch of popular like extensions that people use. There's Node-RED, which like is an IBM project for doing very visual programming, which a lot of people like. There's another project called AppDaemon, which is similar to the way OpsDroid works in terms of doing, taking events in, and you can write some Python code and it runs with your home automation. But AppDaemon is very like thread based and relies on callbacks. And whereas OpsDroid uses a lot of the modern async await coroutine syntax in Python. So from my point of view, as a personal preference, and I wanted to add that ability. Also, I just like OpsDroid.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, it makes sense to centralize it there. Sorry, Fabio.
Sorry, I would just want to say as well, and just add in on that example. Yeah, you are focusing on, you can do the same thing with Home Assistants, but let's say that you have your bot configured to do way more things than just using Home Assistant. So let's say that you have the commands for Home Assistants, but then you also need to do something with your server or whatever, and then you pass a command to that bot. So then you kind of like you can do everything that you need to do straight from OpsDroid instead of having to go into different kind of services. So I think that's the value. Or one of
it's a level of abstraction above. I can see that. Cool.
Yeah, you could have Home Assistant put the kettle on so you can make coffee when you push your code to GitHub, right?
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, I'm wondering, because I'm already thinking about, basically Philips have got a really primitive version of all of this. So I'm wondering, could I use a sensor to not only turn my lights on, but I don't know, make my coffee and turn the music on and this kind of stuff. I mean, I assume that
if I'm not mistaken, I think Jacob set up some of his home cinema with OpsDroid and the Philips thing, if I remember.
Yeah.
Let's hear about this.
So, okay. Yeah. So this is just if I turn on my TV, it creates like a sensor change event, just to say that the TV has gone from off to on, and then I've got a simple skill that speaks to the hue lights and dims them. So it's like when you go in the cinema and the lights dim.
Perfect.
Right, so it's just, again, it's a very like if this then that style action and trigger event kind of flow. But one of the things I wanted to achieve early on with OpsDroid is that you configure a single OpsDroid to do lots of things. So one of the limitations we kept hitting with Hubot was that you could only configure one chat service at a time. And we had 2 different Slacks because of random organizational details. So you had to have 2 different Hubots with like overlapping config. So I wanted to just make sure that OpsDroid could plug into multiple chat clients at the same time. So you could have plugged into Home Assistant and plugged into Matrix and plugged into Slack, and you could like act a bit like a bridge, or you could move things back and forth, or as Fabio said, you might be like me and have a home server set up for doing dev work and things, and you might want to automate that and control some of that, but also have your lights dim when you turn the telly on.
The multiple connector thing is basically how we ended up getting deep into OpsDroid, because we wanted something to iron out some of the issues with the Matrix Slack bridge. So we configured OpsDroid to have a Slack connector and a Matrix connector. It does a whole bunch of things across both.
Yeah, we basically re-implemented Slack teams in Matrix with an OpsDroid bot.
Okay. So this was Picard. This was from a few years ago, right? So what does that do in the sense of bridging? Does it bridge messages across or something else?
It uses.
So the joke is it manages the bridge. But yeah, so it kind of, you set up the bridge with a Slack team and a Matrix community on either side. And what it does then is whenever something happens on one side of that bridge that like isn't just a basic message, like something that the bridge itself can't handle. It'll mirror that over to the other side. So if you create a new room on the Slack side, that gets sent as an event to Picard, which will then like create that room on the Matrix side, put it in the community, set the avatar and the room permissions, and invite people who said they want to be invited to new
Got
rooms.
it. Okay. I mean, so this comes down to, you know, there was a great need in the Python Solr community, I guess, for bridging Slack and Matrix. Is that how you guys ended up getting so involved?
Yeah, Drew and I are both involved in organising a conference called Python in Astronomy, and we built this for that, basically.
Right. Didn't realise that kind of detail.
Yeah, so it since we wrote the first version of Picard, the app service has gained features like auto room syncing and stuff. But what Picard in its, I think, third year iteration conference was last week, so it's just gone through its third major iteration for the latest version of the conference. The main thing it kind of has morphed into is a bit more of a community management tool, like in general, as opposed to a Matrix specific definition of the word community. So it provides like welcome messages to people. So when they join the Matrix community or join the Slack team, it sends a welcome message telling them about the conference, like how to use the bot, and like reminding them of any organizational details they need for the conference. And then it lets you create rooms and keeps things in sync, so it like uses an alias template and generally gives you a little bit more control over how you want those new rooms bridged from Slack to Matrix than the app service does, and also allows you to do it the other direction. You can create a room on Matrix that turns up on Slack, which I don't think the app service lets you do.
Okay.
And then also I wrote a Jitsi bot skill that I think I put into him last week, which like posts a link to the Jitsi chat on Matrix in plain text, which then gets sent over to Slack, so people can like join the Jitsi calls on both sides of the bridge.
Right. So they know what link to join.
Yeah.
Okay. So was there some sort of big release recently for OpsDroid? Was that last week?
We never actually got to it, but
yeah.
Oh no. Okay.
We're going to get to it, but yeah, I haven't got around to it yet. So we've been trying to discuss how to make releases more frequent, because we all do this in our spare time, and it is just tricky making sure that things are polished enough. And then also, you know, when you push out a release and something is broken, actually having the time to jump on that and immediately get a bug fix release out can be a challenge when it's all based on volunteer work. So we've been discussing recently ways that we can maybe speed up the release cycle, try and automate as much of it as possible, so that we can get out more frequent releases, because I tend to only do big releases every few months, which is not ideal, given that we have a bunch of contributors jumping on and adding awesome features. I think the fact that it's so pluggable means we've had excellent contribution. There's many different connectors supported now, and different browsers and things that I want to try and fire stuff out as much as possible, but at the same time I don't want to fire out a broken release and break people's like current working setup. So it's a bit of a challenge.
But this relates specifically to the core, right? So everything else can be on its own cadence.
Yeah. So although OpsDroid is pluggable, a lot of the functionality is bundled with the core. So a lot of the connectors kind of are part of the core package. We did initially start out with like a whole load of GitHub repos for all different elements of it, and they would all be pulled in using version control and things. But just maintaining the CI on all of that was enough of a pain. That I started pulling things into the core so that we could roll it all into one test suite and keep everything kind of together. And kind of as the project's matured, we're starting to see issues around the way that plugins are loaded and the way that they're kind of do their dependency management and things, because there's very little of that. I mean, initially we started out kind of as a reaction to the way that Hubot handles plugins. With Hubot, the way that you install a plugin is you just install a node package into your environment, and Hubot just assumes that it should use it. And there's no kind of way to use it for a few years. But it was kind of, I didn't like the magicness of you install a random node package and your bot's behavior changed. Wanted to make everything kind of based on a central configuration file. And so everything could be kind of toggled off and on for installing your plugins, because it can handle dependency management and all that kind of side of things. So we're kind of making steps in the right direction. I think one of the big things we're going to look at doing is making a load of dependencies optional, because at the moment you just kind of get everything. You can turn things on and off, but you still get all of the dependencies that you would need for all of the features in OpsDroid. But if you're not ever going to use, Telegram, you don't necessarily need the Telegram package, right? So,
yeah. What about? So I've got a note here because it's kind of in my head. But what about end-to-end encryption, in particular for the Matrix connector? Is that something that exists, or would you need to change the SDK in order to get that working?
So at the moment, we're using a async wrapper to the old Python Matrix SDK package, because the world needs more Python Matrix API packages. So I made one. We are hoping to move to using Matrix NIO, the Python package that
Polya
wrote. There is actually an open PR for that. Somebody did the first round of work for that. I don't think that person has tested the end-to-end encryption stuff yet, but they did the work to migrate the code over to using that completely different package. So that's the first step of getting the end-to-end encryption support in Matrix.
Do you think that's a better solution than using Pantaliman to have it indirectly?
Yeah, I mean, given that Pantaliman's written in Python and OpsDroid is written in Python, we might as well just use the Python library, right?
Right, sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's there.
Also,
and also you've got to upgrade the library anyway.
The library is maintained, right? NIO is actually maintained.
And NIO is great too. I mean, it's a really nice library. I've been using it for teaching as much as possible. Yeah, it's really cool. All right, thank you for this introduction. What is the next steps for OpsDroid? I guess we heard a little bit about the need for better release cadence, but what else can we talk about?
So a while ago, as part of the Picard thing, Drew and I implemented like an event system in OpsDroid, where before that everything was a message basically. So we now have a class hierarchy which represents different types of events, which are the core ones are like connector independent. So all your chat platforms would emit a message event and know how to send a message event. So say you get the Matrix connector gets a sync response back from Matrix, it passes it and it'll emit a bunch of different events depending on what's in there. So the Matrix connector understands like room invites. So there's a room invite event in OpsDroid core. So if it gets something in the event block with the sync, it will send a room invite event out to the skills. And it does the same for messages. And then there's like other events like edits and file uploads and images and state events and all manner of other things.
So that would that mean that OpsDroid could do something, when it receives an on invite or on join or something, you could send a welcome message or similar from OpsDroid, or whatever, not welcome message, but flash the lights or whatever it would be.
Yeah, so we use that a little bit for Picard. So like there's a group join event. I can't remember what the actual name of the class is, but basically when somebody joins a Slack team, the Slack connector will, I think this is still an open PR, but the Slack connector will emit a group join event, and then a skill can react to that. So we use that in Picard to send a welcome message to the conference from the bot when the person joins the Slack team, and the same thing is triggered when somebody joins a Matrix community as well.
I see.
So and the skill is structured in such a way that those two events are different, because core doesn't understand the community stuff because it's poorly spec'd. So I just wrote it in the Picard skill, but the same function the skill is triggered by both of those events. There's just got two decorators on it, one for the core join event and one for the community join event. So there's a bunch of like other events we'd like to implement on the Matrix side, things like tombstone support and room upgrades, for instance. We can have the Matrix connector emit a tombstone event and know how to follow one into the new room and stuff.
Right. But, yeah. Okay.
There's like a bunch of other things we want to do with event support as well. So like the way that Stuart said, everything used to be based around messages, and now everything is based around this kind of core event system. But there are still a few things that are a bit message reliant, and one of them is these parsers that use AI APIs or statistical APIs, right? And so all of those rely on message events. They assume that you're going to be passing in a piece of text. It should do whatever analysis it needs to do and pass you back. It basically adds more attributes to the event to give you information about what it discovered. But there's no reason why other event types couldn't be passed through other systems, right? Maybe an image event type. If somebody's uploaded an image and you've got image data passed through in the event, could you send that to some other API which does object detection or nudity detection, so that you can filter out things? If it's like an open conference chat or something, you might want to filter out certain types of images using some kind of machine vision annotation service. So being able to like extend the parsing plugin to handle other types of events is something that we really want to get to.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
No, go.
I know that Dialogflow, they allow images, sounds, or WAV file to run the parser as well. So like Jacob said, there's a lot of different parsers that just gets the different types of file, not just text. And that will be a good thing to implement, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining some strange things. Like, I mean, apart from the sort of auto moderator idea where you send off images and if they're nudity, then, you get a redaction event back or something. But even, I send you a voice message and you get text to speech, a speech to text alongside it or something to that effect. There's all kinds of things you could do there. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of, we want to make it as flexible to the user as they want. Your connector takes in whatever event your chat client can cope with, and then you have a bunch of different services that you can send that off to add as much information to the Python object as you can from wherever. And then when you get into your Python, you're being passed this object, which has got a bunch more information than you had before, and you can make all sorts of different decisions about how you want to handle that.
Yeah, I see. All right, this sounds really great. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we say goodbye?
The main thing I just want to say is, we're a volunteer-run open source project. If you like writing Python and want to work on a project like this, we have tons of open issues. We'd love people to come and help out. We try really hard to be really beginner-friendly. I mean, Fabio is like a great example of somebody who's jumped headfirst into open source and has got on really well with OpsDroid and is now like a maintainer and is like our primary code reviewer and things. So, we really try and we make a big effort to write issues in a way that are beginner friendly. We're always happy to provide support. We've got Matrix and rooms that you can come and like ask us questions. If you have trouble like implementing something, it's much easier for us to like do a back and forth by chat than necessarily be able to carve out the time in our own lives to implement a feature. We're more than happy to like hold somebody's hand through submitting their first PR and contributing to open source. So yeah, if anybody wants to come and contribute, work on the project, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, sounds like a great community. All right, all of you, thank you very much. So many of you out there. Thanks for the great introduction to OpsDroid. See you soon.